The next morning after breakfast, I walked to the Westlake station and caught the Sound Transit Link light rail northbound to their just opened station in Everett, which took about an hour to get there. Unlike the trip to downtown Seattle from the airport, heading north out of Seattle was initially through deep underground tunnels until sunlight finally poured into the light rail train car windows as we emerged just east of Green Lake. Like the trip in from the airport, significant residential and retail villages branched out around each transit station. Roderick Broward had recommended to my staff a little cafe close to the transit station at a meeting place, and I found it without too much difficulty. I spotted Roderick in a spacious semicircle booth and sat down to pick his brain. Hello there, it's so nice to meet you. I'm George, as you probably have guessed. Do you prefer to be called Roderick or just Rod? Rod is what everyone calls me, so that's fine. I read that the Everett Light Rail Station recently opened. It was really a pleasant trip up here, I must say. Yeah, it makes getting back and forth to downtown Seattle much easier, that's for sure. So Rod, I spent much of yesterday meeting with Beth, Farad, Reg and Jim, and then Leslie, as she was a little behind schedule. We had a fascinating talk about how the main principles of the Group met and how the idea of a citizens initiative slowly took shape. Beth said that you, Jeff Metz, and Brian Fennery really stepped up by putting forth a vision of what a future city of Secure might physically look like. Even though that vision doesn't resemble the current city, it served its purpose during the initiative's signature drive. It showed the registered voters who signed your signature sheets something tangible at least. Yeah, that's really what we were trying to accomplish. The Group until then had all these ideas of what a city would look like, how parts of it should function, and how people would end up as citizens of Secure. It reminded me of a catchy lyric from an old country music song that went, "Let's get on down to the main attraction with a little less talk and a lot more action." I was allowed to see some of the now archived content of the Group's old website, which included your presentation. Tell me about the so-called square donuts. I'll take the credit, or the scorn, for that one. Actually, I thought it was an inspired way to go about providing housing for a population of misfits. Well, the Group had already settled on a rough size for each residential housing unit, 220 square feet. They based it on a Seattle zoning code change that allowed micro small efficiency dwelling units, or SEDUs as they became known. That tiny dwelling unit included a very small kitchenette, a small fridge, sink, and microwave, I think. No washer dryer. Residents had to use the building's laundry room or rooms. So I went with that amount of space for each unit, and then I started putting together a list of items that I liked and items that I disliked. Let's take the last one first. With a population of misfits, I didn't want internal stairways, hallways, or elevators. We've all seen photos of low-income housing projects where all of those things were thoroughly trashed, so why have them at all? Yeah, absolutely. So if you create a large building without elevators, how many floors up can you expect residents to climb? I felt that 3 was the limit. If the overlords of Secure had residents who were unable to climb upstairs, they could put them at ground level. Well, then I thought, well, if residents walked up to this structure at ground level, couldn't they also take the stairs down 3 levels to a housing unit? But who would want to live in the dark basement with no windows to the outside? I'm pretty sure I wouldn't want one of those rooms. Well, that's how I got to my square donut concept. Build these fairly large housing units around a central courtyard and excavate the dirt out of the middle, going 3 stories down. And then use the center for a lawn, benches, and gardens, etc. The 3 below-grade levels would all have windows looking out into this courtyard area. The lower 3 levels would contain roughly half of the housing units of the upper 3 levels, since we wouldn't build any housing unit without a window facing the donut hole. So Rod, how many living units would be in each square donut? 216. Beth had put out a wild-ass guess as to the size that Secure should be, and that was 24,000 residents. If we constructed 100 square donuts, we could house 21,600 people, close enough for what we were trying to accomplish with this first draft of the city. So Rod, tell me about the robots. That part was intriguing. We had really only begun with Secure's housing challenge. People needed to eat, and they had to do laundry for starters. And those are really big starters, to tell you the truth. Did we actually want misfits to fix their own meals in their tiny kitchenettes? Or would they be fed in cafeterias? I don't know. The three of us talked it over and pretty much came to the conclusion that every day in a Secure cafeteria might look like the food fight scene from Animal House. And shared laundry rooms would also foster confrontation. People would be stuck sitting around waiting for the laundry to be washed and then dried for fear that someone else might steal it. I remember the days of living in an apartment and having to haul my laundry to the local laundromat. Half the machines were out of order, and the washers that did work were either full of hair from people washing their dog blankets, or they stunk of fragrant laundry soaps that made my eyes water. Exactly. That's when Brian came forth with his idea. I have to give credit where credit is due. Brian's input was the seed that inspired me to develop the mover car, which I guess we'll talk about later on. Brian had heard about these computer-dispatched, battery-powered robotic carts that several high-rises in Singapore were using to deliver goods to residents. Think of rolling dumbwaiters. He looked at the specs and thought that we could modify them for our model. We'd need to put an elevator in each square donut, but it would only be for these robotic carts. Each cart could hold 3 fairly large locking bins. The exterior of each housing unit would need an interface to allow these carts to attach and then transfer a bin into a waiting receptacle. After delivery of a bin, the cart would detach, a door would close off the portal, and the cart would move on to its next stop. Inside the housing units, there would no longer be a need for a kitchenette. In its place, there would be a receptacle for accepting bins. Now assume that Secure has large central kitchens, but no cafeterias. The resident orders a meal using an electronic tablet device, and it arrives directly to their housing unit. When finished, the resident puts the dirty dishes into the bin that's still on a receptacle and pushes a button that requests a pickup. A short time later, a cart interfaces with that housing unit, the door opens, the bin is fetched, and the access door closes. Rod, can I have one of those, please? Yeah, it sounds like something out of the Jetsons, that's for sure. The robot dumbwaiters solved our food issue, but they also were a solution for laundry, trash removal, and the delivery of small items like toilet paper, toothpaste, soap, and alike. For the purpose of efficiency, our visions of Secure now included large central kitchen and laundry facilities, no shared laundry rooms, no cafeterias. We felt that underground corridors connecting the kitchen and laundry to the 100 housing structures would be the best way of keeping the robotic carts out of the way and safe from the elements as well. I'm beginning to see how the voters, when presented with your ideas, would take a liking to this new city. Tell me about the internal wall and other structures, if you will. Well, sure, the MM group felt strongly about the separation of residents within Secure. People with violent rap sheets should live in one half, while the non-violent misfits would go in the other half. We allocated space for a special building that would house the severely mentally ill residents who had no outside support. Did Beth share you her story about what happened to her leg? Yes, unfortunately, how tragic. So basically, we constructed a 20-foot tall concrete wall to separate the city into 2 sections with a metal building located on either side. We felt that all of these residents would need to be put to work, so we incorporated the kitchen and laundry structure into the wall, dividing each facility right down the middle so residents from each neighborhood could work without ever crossing paths. We added another large structure, parts of it divided in half, to house a wellness facility, a school, a police guard station, a jail, a city hall with council members, and a courthouse. We felt that Secure couldn't be a city of all work and no play, so we came up with what we call Town Squared. It was also incorporated into the dividing wall that would contain recreation and entertainment venues. We kind of envisioned things like a swimming pool, bowling alley, cafes, a theater, and more. We felt that it could alternate availability between the neighborhoods, maybe every other day. So Rod, with all of that, how big did you think the city should be? With 50 square donuts per neighborhood, and with roughly a third of the land remaining, we thought that 1,000 acres would be a minimal size. Now for reference, California's Disneyland sits on about 450 acres, and that includes the parking lots. The extra land would be for outside businesses, another job creator for the population. You know, the rendering of Secure that we placed on our website, it looked pretty good. That was all Brian, by the way. We added rooftop gardens to each square donut structure, paved paths for passenger trams, walking and bicycles, and nice landscaping throughout. It certainly didn't resemble a prison, even though it had the same 20-foot high concrete wall that we used to separate the neighborhoods completely surrounding the city. Well, thank you so much, Rod, for your time. I know that you're a busy man, and I'll let you get back to work. Sounds good. Take care.